Welcome everyone to the IFS Down Under podcast, where we have deep conversations with leaders in the IFS space and share the stories and the wisdom of Australian IFS therapists. I'm your host, Oliver Brooke, and I'm here today with my co-host, Loranie Leas. Welcome, Loranie. It's always really great to have you back. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ollie. And yes, I'm so delighted to be here with you again, Ollie, and to be here with you, Emma. It feels like we just saw each other yesterday. So,
Yeah, we may have spoken 2 days ago, and yeah.
yeah. So my system feels so settled and just very excited just to share this space with you, you and Ollie. Welcome.
Yeah. Wonderful. So Emma, before I introduce you, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're presenting. For me, that's the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the legacy burdens in our society which have been caused by colonisation. And we acknowledge the impact that colonisation has had on First Nations people and the exiling of their elders, their healers, their languages, practices, children and culture. I also want to acknowledge and respect their adaptive survival and the continuing protection of their children, their culture, their language and practices. And all of us want to pay our deepest respect to their elders and healers, past, present and emerging, especially those on the lands on which we meet. And we openly welcome all First Nations people to be part of this conversation and hold hope for healing for us all. So today, Loranie and I have the pleasure of interviewing Emma Diamond. So I'm just going to read, Emma, your bio first, and then we'll ask you some questions. Yeah. So Emma is our friend and colleague and Australia's first ever IFS Institute solo lead trainer. Emma is a certified internal family systems therapist and approved case consultant. Emma offers IFS therapy and individual and group supervision, holding a master's in family therapy from Newcastle University, and has 20 years clinical experience working with complex and relational trauma. Emma's worked with IFS in the context of individual and family therapy, including with children and young people across culture, complexity, and identity. Her experience is primarily with populations experiencing domestic and family violence and with survivors of childhood abuse and neglect, including experience working with institutional and historical childhood sexual abuse. Emma worked for several non-government organisations in the Northern Territory and New South Wales, specialising in complex PTSD and domestic violence services, including supporting those affected by the Royal Commission into Institutional Childhood Sexual Abuse and for the Department of Justice, New South Wales. Emma is passionate about supporting reconciliation, working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations people to listen deeply and support healing from historical, racial, intergenerational and personal trauma, while also supporting First Nations practitioners and clinicians in applying internal family systems to their communities and services. I know Emma for her warmth, her creativity, her clear facilitation, her empowering presence, and her love for the natural world, dance, and playfulness. And recently, Emma has been teaching kind of international trainings in the Level 1 IFS trainings. And this year, Emma and Loranie taught the first ever All-Australian trainer-led IFS Level 1 training, which I believe had the whole team was from the region, right? All Australian and New Zealand staff. Yeah, which is pretty incredible. So Emma, so wonderful to have you. Thank you for being on IFS Down Under. Yeah.
Well, Ollie, Loranie, I'm genuinely thrilled to have this opportunity to connect with you, and also to whoever watches and listens to this. I'm really very happy to be here, even though my nervous parts are up, because this is my first ever podcast interview. And I think I was sharing before we started that, parts of me are really comfortable centering my clients and being focused on others, and I'm really just sort of adapting to these days being a little bit more focused on as well, and having to share who I am. So I'm going to kind of acknowledge my nervous parts and give myself permission to just check in and pause and go slow. But I really do appreciate the opportunity and to share a little bit more of who I am and my journey, hopefully to connect more to people and to give a little bit more of an insight as to the journey of where I've been getting to this trainer place, what I call Trainerville. It's a new planet that I know Loranie and I are just adapting to. But, you know, really, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you. And I just want to also acknowledge that, you know, I'm coming from Gumbaynggirr country, which is around the mid-north coast of New South Wales. And I really want to acknowledge the land and the beauty and the rich culture and the language that is from this place that I live on. So I want to say Ginagay to everyone. Hello.
Thank you, Emma. And I also want to acknowledge the Duag people that's from my region. I'm in New South Wales, Sydney here in the hills area. So thank you. And yes, Emma, we you know, thank you for that deep and passionate introduction, Ollie and Emma, you're offering, and just being here, sharing our space. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to be able to really get to use this time, Emma, just to really be able to offer you to share with us how your journey has been from, you know, IFS clinician right up to now an IFS trainer, and just to really see how far you have come and what do you hope for this community here in Australia and New Zealand. So I just want to get a bit of a glimpse into your world today.
Beautiful. I'm really happy to share it.
Yeah. So maybe we start off, Emma, if you can tell us about the origins of your IFS journey, and how IFS became part of your personal healing journey and your professional life.
Yeah. You know, in just thinking about this, what I want to say is, like, I'm more of a kind of long and windy road with less of a clear vision person. So most of the ways in which I have found myself on this journey is really unplanned. And so how did I come to IFS? Professionally and personally, I suppose the parts of me that really fired up, started that journey, was when I was working. I worked in the Northern Territory for 7 or 8 years, and I was living in Alice Springs and working out on communities around the Central Desert. And I guess I was, you know, after degrees in university, you know, what I learned there, which was quite gave me a lot of theoretical context, and then I'm finding myself you know, in the Northern Territory, out bush, working with Aboriginal communities, trying to apply those theories that I, you know, learned in university, and just going, you know, this just doesn't quite fit at all, really. And so I really had to start working out of the box. And I was very lucky that I think it was around 2011, 2012, I joined a kind of cross-organizational sort of clinical supervision group in Alice that was supervised by Joe Tucci, who at the time was the CEO of the Australian Childhood Foundation, who sadly died this year. He was an amazing man. And he used to come out to Alice once a month and bring us the latest trauma research, you know, from like Peter Levine, Judith Herman, Dan Siegel, Bessel, Janina Fisher, polyvagal theory. And in doing so, we looked at the theory and then really tried to apply it to on-the-ground work that we were doing, whether that be at the time I was working with children in the context of family violence, and working to keep the family, to support the family unit, but also to connect with kids and really help them to have experiences of what it feels like, to feel, I guess, more connected and safe, and helping parents bring that in a culturally appropriate way. So we had this incredible in-depth supervision group, and I kind of found there's all these different theories. I knew that somehow they came together, but I actually struggled to try and sort of figure it all out. And sort of boiled it all down to focusing on experiences of safety, attunement, co-regulation, with a curiosity on protective mechanisms, and de-shaming and creating tolerable connection. I was trained in family-based attachment therapy, and did the work of, I don't know if anyone knows, Dan Hughes in dyadic developmental psychotherapy, which is really, if I translate it in IFS terms, self being the parent, exile being the child, and helping to work dyadically for the parent to be available to the child's experience. And that was also within the world of foster care, foster carers as well. So kin-based foster caring. And I guess, if I look back on it now, a lot of the work, even though a lot of the supervision wasn't particularly focused on us, but it was focused on us staying calm, in being able to be regulated. Mm-hmm. And so now that I look back at it and I go, okay, basically I was working from self, or a place of calm, to connect with kids and their families in a context of, what is called HIP trauma. So historical, intergenerational, persistent, which means it's going on now, not in the past, but it's happening now, like marginalization, racism is still very, very current, and the personal trauma that they carry. And I was sort of orientating to that, being calm and connected in that space, and appreciating that context in how it affects relationship. And, I guess I was wading through all of that. But I'm going to move to the personal now. Whilst I was doing all of that, learning about trauma theory, I've got two kids. I've got now a 22-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, bless them. My son at the time, who was 9 years old, was diagnosed with cancer. And he had to go through almost a year of chemotherapy and radiation, and really notice my heart just still holds so much about that experience for him and that experience for me. And I have his consent to talk a little bit about this piece of his experience. But I'm also really aware of the context of his early life trauma, and is something that I really want to just respect. But I also wanted to say he developed rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, at a very early age, at 2 years old. So his story and our story is pretty layered. And I guess so at the same time, there's a confluence of the professional and the personal. my questing to help my child parenting parts, went into overdrive. And I just want to shout out to any parent. I guess one of the subgroups that I kind of identify with is parents that are having to navigate life-threatening illness or disease in their children. And I do and have in the past worked quite a lot with parents that are navigating that kind of thing with their kids. Things like autoimmune conditions, diabetes, all those kind of chronic management things. So yes, my questing to help my child parenting parts went into overdrive with this theory that I was also looking at in my professional life. And hey, guess what? I came across a paper that was all about 2013, maybe towards the end, that my supervisor had sent about rheumatoid arthritis and IFS. And, we were, at the time in my professional life, we were looking at the ACEs study and the prevalence of autoimmune diseases in 4 or more ACEs. And there was a lot of exploration around chronic stress and how it affects epigenetics and how those epigenetics, the switches on our genes, can then switch on what may have been switched off in terms of chronic illness and diseases. So, I had that professional, and I know for, a lot of Indigenous peoples, diabetes and chronic kidney issues and autoimmune conditions are also quite prevalent. So, professional and personal collide. And so, I switched on to IFS. And I also found that working, I think I might have got the workbook at that stage, and I was working with kids, and I had sand tray and clay and drawing, and I just found that they took to parts language like that, and it was really kind of organic. I didn't know the protocol at that time. I just worked with parts in the sand tray. And it was incredibly normalizing and de-shaming and able to create a spaciousness where they could then reflect on what was affecting them. So I guess that's switching back to the professional. And then I left the Northern Territory and moved here into the mid-North Coast and started to work with, work as a generalized kids counsellor in family settings, domestic and family violence. And I also worked for the Royal Commission into institutionalized childhood sexual abuse with the survivors there, kind of in a casework, therapeutic, what do they need role. And I seeked out a local supervisor who is now retired, but is a really, really wonderful champion. And she encouraged me to go to the Bonnie Weiss intros that Simon de Sonia was putting on. I don't know what year it was, maybe 2015. Loved it. So wanted to keep going, and then got into the first level 1 in Australia. So that's a long version of the personal and professional journey to IFS. And of course, in all of that questing for my child part that was so focused on him, I guess what IFS did was help me to do the U-turn on what kind of traumas I was carrying as well, and what work I could do on my system in order to really be present for him and my daughter. That's a long answer.
It's a beautiful, deep answer. Thank you, Emma. Yeah.
But I guess that's that point of like long and windy roads.
Yeah.
And I also think I'm going to presume that a lot of people in this space have also done that kind of deep dive on many different types of trauma theories and modalities, and for me, and I know for a lot of people, IFS made a kind of intuitive sense that clicked.
Mm.
And it was kind of that click that I was looking for.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, you already had this exposure in a setting
Yeah.
where you were able to apply it straight away of all of these different approaches.
Yeah.
And then you were having this personal experience with your son and also your own experience with
Yeah.
your parenting parts and your own trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was it about? I'm curious, like what was it about the IFS model that did click for you? That what did feel intuitive? Can you kind of name that? Yeah, was it until you did the level one
It,
that that click happened, or was it straight away when you read
no,
about it? Yeah.
guess it was the joy of like get a little piece, practice a little piece, see that it works, get a bit more training, like intro, practice a little bit, see that it really works. And then level one was like, oh, right.
Mm,
Now I get what this thing is.
mm,
Um, so it was sort of more gradual for me. But I have to say there's maybe some benefit from the past training that I did that helped me to be extremely clear around childhood development. Um, that and seeing how kids take to it with great relief and relish and can speak that language. It was the simplicity of it, I think, as well, that just went, oh, all the
mm,
theory just felt so big up here, but this feels really good here.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I resonate with that. That's my experience too.
Mm.
With applying it, especially with kids. Yeah. And even
Yeah.
adults seem to take to it in that intuitive way too. Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm curious, you've just, I think the two of you have just finished, or you're still part of running the first ever Australian IFS training, the first ever all Australian level one. Is that right? Is that complete, or are you still partway through it?
Well, that's complete.
The complete.
And that was
Awesome.
a
Yeah.
particularly special,
Yeah.
delightful training.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of the first ever New Zealand level one training.
Mm,
We've just come back from New Zealand.
fantastic. And so
Yeah.
what's it like, Emma, having come from it, professionally and personally yourself and going through level one, as a student and learning the model, and now you're coming back and you're providing it to your community. Yeah, what's that been like to run the first ever Australian one and now the first ever New Zealand level one? It's a big question
A
too.
joy, a joy,
Mm,
a privilege, a pinch
mm,
me. Can't believe we're
mm,
doing this. Um, and we're very much aware doing this. So this collective team sense, a bit of a grassroots as well, like moving it from this sort of international trainers to local. Here we are. I'm there's a real energy of being really thrilled and proud. And and that I just want to say that there's a lot of there's so many people that have contributed to that particularly Simon de Sonia and his coordination and incredible, wonderful managers that put together these big trainings and make them happen. It's a huge, huge effort, and also to, of course, and I'll speak more about Einat, but Einat Bronstein's been my mentor. Loranie's mentor has seeded and watered and supported the growth of this local to get us to this point of being able to teach locally with Australian trainers. And a lot of other people contributed to that, but there is just the most wonderful um, cohort of PAs as well, incredibly skilled, really knowledgeable, very experienced program assistants that I love.
mm,
So, it has a sense of a real we did it. Um,
mm,
and I also want to acknowledge that the we did it in terms of that first training is that I had to do a lot of work to get to that. So I'm going to acknowledge that, which I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, definitely, Emma. Like, for you to be able to co-lead and myself, tagging along, doing the co-leading with our beautiful PA team, in here locally, it has been such an enormous privilege to be able to launch this baby. Um, but leading up to that, I know that you have had lots of international trainings leading up to
Mhm.
our first ever Australian training, and co-leading with other trainers overseas. Um, what do you see are the similarities or differences in the international trainings and the dynamics compared to the Australian trainings so far?
Oh, well, I really appreciate being asked this question because I feel like I called my last year and the year and this year my adventures in IFS land. What was one piece of those adventures in IFS land, which I refer to as that before I taught in Australia, I taught I taught for Life Architect, which was actually across Europe and the Middle East. There were 24 different countries represented in that training. I've taught in Russia, I've taught in South Korea with translations, I've taught in across Asia and all Asia training. So I just feel like I went out into the world to get all my experience to be then able to bring it back here. So, but that was done alone. I was in my little small town in the mid north coast, in my um, in my office with my dog out in the world, and I just noticed my
Oh.
parts that are really excited to share that experience because they haven't been able to share it
Mm.
so much, um, and it was an incredible opportunity. I feel like I met so many people. And shared the gift of IFS in so many different contexts. Um, so is it okay if I just speak a little bit about that and then the similarities and differences?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I've got a couple of things that I wanted to say, so I've written them down. But when I think about it, it felt like it was like plugging into the globe and to
Mm.
humanity. Um, it was just getting to connect with so many really beautiful, diverse people, um, and recalling like little and big moments of courage and honesty and pain and complexity and rupture and clumsiness and finesse and heartbreak and touching on so many different legacies and histories. Um, and sitting with big divides and differences and kind of learning to hold self, to trust self energy, whether it be mine, others, the spaces, and doing a lot of work with my parts and the parts of other people. So it's sort of in my system now. I carry that experience as this incredible contact with diversity. And within that contact with diversity, um, finding great similarities and sitting with great difference. At times it was really, really hard. And parts of me are still in shock that, oh my God, we did that. And others are just really just what a privilege. And I'd say an exponential growth curve for me and learning how to turn up and teach this model to anyone really. It's that reliable. And, you know, yeah, what else do
Mm.
I want to say about that? Yeah, quite a lot of humility. And also I got to work, it's just to work quite randomly, like just, oh, there's another co-lead trainer. Hi, how are you? Let's put on a level. So I got to work with sort of colleagues from around the world, and I in that journey of working together across a level one, become friends. Really remembering those people, and I'll be so happy to see them again and work with them again. So it was really amazing. And I don't want to give a fully curated image of it. It was incredibly intense.
Mm.
And it was at strange hours, and and not the diversity was cultural diversity, it was historical diversity, it was really important to be aware of geopolitical things, that the privilege of being here in Australia and living in more or less peace, like it was just needing my awareness of so much more, and what people are holding. So it was, yeah, kind of a bit beyond words. But the similarities, I guess the similarities is that IFS speaks to the human experience, and it meets us at like a level that's so relevant and applicable to all. And I just love it for that. And I seen sort of themes that repeat themselves in level ones across languages and diverse cultural backgrounds that kind of resonate across the differences between us. But it gives us like a language to help us navigate our differences and acknowledge the burdens and the legacies that come with our differences. So I think it's made me love IFS more because of the uniting lens that we are all systemic and structural, and we all have self, and that's across the board, that's through history, that's everybody. So I just feel like it gives us a tool to navigate everything else. And so that was coming away from each of those more international level ones, just in awe of how similar we all are we all know what rejection, humiliation, abandonment, grief feels like. The contexts of how we come to those feelings are different. And the burdens can have different weights and dimensions. But I love IFS for what it's given all of us in terms of a frame. And I'd say the differences that I notice, I just want to shout out to Shadi Ram, who assisted us on a level one, and who taught me that even if you're brought up in a space of conflict and taught that diversity is unsafe, he, in the process of being with diversity, has learnt that diversity brings great richness, and many voices can kind of widen our perspective and broaden our understandings of ourselves and each other. And I really thank him for, I guess, handing to me what he's learned in his life around the gift of diversity, and how that can alleviate, appreciating diversity, being with diversity can alleviate our tribalism or our rigid boundaries around our identities. So, gosh, the differences are many, 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 many. The context in which we're living, privilege, the external constraints that we live in. For many of the participants that I worked with, those external constraints were totally real, completely currently being navigated in their lives. Experiences of marginalization and persecution, that's what's happening in the here and now as well as the past. And, that's a difference that's really important to note and know of in the room. and very important factors to consider when we're delivering trainings. You know, these are trainings across Europe and the Middle East and Asia and Russia. And so all those geopolitical contexts are there, and they're hugely you know, some participants are living with incredible constraints and current burdens happening now. There's, you know, a lot of intense polarizations and deep pain. So in many ways, I felt like the privilege I had of living in relative peace, in a democracy with less state control and censorship, of currently not being on any front lines of war or totalitarian control, meant that my self-energy, that I was what I could contribute. And it seemed as though creating these kind of really creating safe self-led spaces meant a lot to those participants that were currently navigating real world constraints. And so, you know, those are the differences that really stood out to me, and made me, of course, really appreciate the privilege that we have in Australia, that we currently have in Australia. And I don't want to say we as in everybody, because I'm very aware that it's not all of us that have the privilege of peace in this country. But it was a big journey to touch on all these different places in the world. And, you know, I just want to say I'd love to do more of it. But I also know that there's a great demand and need here locally. Yeah. Thanks. Good question. That was the second big question I wanted to answer thoroughly.
Yeah. There might be a few more, hopefully. Thank you so much, Emma, for
the rest
sharing
I haven't
that.
written notes on. The rest I'm good to go, I think.
Great. Wow. No, that was huge.
Yeah.
So many things we could kind of expand there. One thing that kind of stands out for me that I want to ask you about is in this whole process of your own transformation as a trainer and having to hold space for so many people in those contexts, in so many different contexts, countries, situations, who have been your supports and who has influenced you and been there for you? You've mentioned Simon, you've mentioned Einat. Yeah, I'm just curious, kind of in the IFS space, who are your mentors? I know there's so many people outside of Dick Schwartz who have influenced the model and who have contributed to this, you know, Susan McConnell and Mitchie Rose and Kay Gardner and Paul Ginter and Einat and Mike Elkin, lots of different people have all contributed different things. So who are the people that kind of influence you, support you so that you can go out into the world in this way and have that self-energy to show up for these different groups?
Yeah. So what I notice is it's the people that I have had connection and contact with. I think what impacts and stays with me definitely more than words is experiences, and what through experiences with some of these trainers and mentors I've been left with or gifted. I'm pretty sure that in terms of Einat Bronstein, I haven't internalized Einat Bronstein. She kind of, sometimes she's on my shoulder, sometimes she's behind me. I am so grateful to that wonderful human being. What I notice is that it has been other people that have noticed my gifts before I have. And when I viscerally recall Einat in my system, it was being seen and encouraged and loved and inspired and supported by an incredibly astute, intelligent, profoundly loving human. I don't, in terms of what is a mentor, or what is to leave the imprint of support, cheering on, celebration, but also the capacity to point things out that are really good, as a way of, hey, have a look at that. Why don't you focus on that? I remember one time when I was learning to be a trainer, was my at level 1 that I was starting to do offer my meditations and maybe one teaching piece and just little steps in this trainer space. And I offered a meditation, and Einat's feedback about it was really speaking directly to my internal dynamics and family of origin, which is, I'm the firstborn, parentified, very responsible. It's my how what I do or don't do it impacts others is my responsibility. This the parts of me, and I'm saying parts, not part, but the parts of me that believed that I'm responsible for everything that doesn't happen. If with what I offer, what I open, the carefulness that I was holding around all of that. And I think that, I think that also resonated with how I might, in the early days, have turned up for my clients as feeling overly responsible and very, very careful. And so that's like targeted essential feedback for me as a trainer to work on those parts. And that when I worked with those parts with my supervisor, Paul Newstat, who I also love, I was able to do really loving, thorough work with those parts and unburden them, therefore be able to turn up with a lot more self and a lot more trust in everybody, really, including myself. So Einat is very close and special in my system. Think about her a lot. And then my supervisor, bless. There's a lot of work done in that space, and will continue to be. I think it's an essential. The role of being a trainer comes with an enormous amount of power, and to hold that power in an ethical and right way means that we have to consistently reflect on it, on ourselves, and on how we are relating to being in that role. And so I really appreciate my supervisor for that, as well as those other trainers that I've had really great contact with. Marielle Pastor, who my system, when I think of Marielle, brings an enormous amount of warmth and play and creativity and realness. And Pam, I can never remember her second name. Names. Thank you. I had like 2 Pams in my childhood that were my mum's friends, so I can't not go to their surnames. And then Krause, thank you. Pam Krause, who I did my first level 3 with, and I did a demo in that level 3 that was, without me knowing it, the demo that I needed to do before I became a trainer. And without me knowing it, that Pam would be the trainer that trained me to be a trainer. So she just brings an enormous amount of good cheer, real honesty, speaks for her parts, great role modeling, taught me a lot. And the other one that has left a real imprint on me is Anne Simcoe. I have parts that want to be like Anne. I am so passionate about legacy work and collective legacy work. My parts say, we want to get good at that collective energy at legacy work. It's like a thing over there that we want to really work toward. And of course, Dick, actually, I met Dick, and that was really great for my system, because I sensed and felt like this genuine, intelligent interest in people, everyone he met, a real interest, and particularly unguarded interest, and no airs or anything there. Just was like, oh, hi, Dick. How you doing? Interesting conversation, real openness. And as a leader, that's a fantastic quality to have. Just to really, really be interested in everyone that comes your way. So I really want to honor that as something that I also practice. Yeah. So they're my people. I'm sure there's more, but
Yeah.
they're the ones that are alive in my system.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Emma. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all need that, especially as therapists, as trainers, as supervisors. Yeah, to have those people in our corner who are guiding us, who are providing safe spaces for us, who are helping point things out to us. Yeah, it's really lovely to know that you're held by all of that, so that then you can hold so many others. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a systemic, I see it systemically. It's like those that hold me, there's others holding them. And, and as I hold others, it's just this sort of web of support, actually.
Yeah. The web of support, as far as they are coming through you, and you're offering that to us and to the wider community. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Emma. Emma, I'm curious. Like, you mentioned one part that you became acutely aware of, which is the part that holds a lot of responsibility, given being the firstborn in your family and having to take on a lot of the responsibility. Were there other parts that you have become aware of since you have become a trainer, and how that part's been evolved?
Yes. It's like, okay, as a therapist, you work with the therapist part. And then as a PA, as you go up in sort of like a sense of responsibility, or a role of responsibility and some power or authority, it's like the next level of work. And it's not just one or two parts. It's like a plethora. Oh, shit. There's all these other parts. And then a trainer, there's another, it's like an exponential, reveal. Oh, what I did get to know. So the kind of like imprints of my early life, all those parts that were structured there. But then it's all about my relationship with having authority and leaning into it or leaning out of it. That demo I talked about doing with Pam in my level 3 was really about how staying small is safe. Particularly, that was really working with the legacy of being a woman, and how staying everybody's friend and staying in the field of equitable, I'm equal to those. I don't have power above or power of a role. I just stay small and be everyone's friend, and which was a legacy, and a couple of different ones actually, but that it was all those protectors that I'm still working with, of what it is to be in a role that has influence and brings something very, IFS is a really powerful tool, and level 1s are very experiential, and it's a real responsibility to be in the role of that's what we are bringing to people. And so I'm pretty in awe of some of my managers that I didn't know I had until I became a trainer. In the beginning, they worked like crazy, like all of my lectures and everything that I wanted to see, and the structure of everything, and like, oh my God, in the middle of the nights, what about this? And I had to learn actually to unblend from my trainer part or parts. And so it would let me sleep. So it would stop waking up at 3 o'clock with great ideas or concerns and worries, or and I now say that my totem animal for being a trainer is the octopus, because you know how the octopus have tendrils, and in each tendril they can sense things independently from the other tendrils.
Wow.
That may be a pretty basic understanding of the neuro consciousness of octopus, but it's like you have to sense different things on different levels. Some of them are pragmatic, some of them are about your role and the context, some of them about the dynamics that's happening over here, some of them about what's needed now. You're learning all of that now as well, Loranie, like when to lean in, when to lean out. There's just 20 different learning edges all at once. So party pretty much permanently. But I'm used to it now. Yeah, and also very used to, I really trusting that if we speak for our parts and we work with our parts and we keep up the U-turn, and we just practice that self-leadership, it's going to be okay. Yeah.
It makes me, thank you for that again, Emma. It makes me want to ask you, I remember you were a program assistant in both my level 1 and 2. I feel really blessed to have you in there, and I got to witness you do at least one demo in the level 1, and so I've seen you work, and you support another very important person in my life, so I know of the impact that you have. And I also know that you have a part of you that is a really strong advocate for rights and for justice and for things like that. And I did wonder, now that you're encountering all of these different systemic issues and things, how do you kind of stay self-led, like find self-led advocacy? And does that part, is that one of the ones that you've had to be with in your as you become a trainer? The part of you that's a strong advocate, and I'm curious how you stay kind of self-led with that part.
I read this question earlier. It's a really good question, Oliver. And I'm not sure if I've thoroughly reflected to do it justice, but I'll give it a go. Recently I came across a quote by Dick, and it was in I was watching Einat continuity program on values and beliefs, and she had written to Dick about this topic, about I guess self-led advocacy, and he written back to her and said something that I wrote down, which is, and I've got it here, so I'll read it. I've more or less memorized it. Self has the clarity to see injustice and the confidence to act to change it, but the compassion to do so without shaming. And I don't know if that's like that quote at the moment is my ballast for leadership. In how I interact and lean into dynamics or with people, or so I just wanted to highlight that. It was like a really small piece of what Einat was talking about, but it just kind of, this landed. And I contemplated that quote, and I was like, that's how I want to turn up.
I'm so glad you shared that. I just got tingles all up my spine when you said that. Yeah, that really landed.
Yeah. So that's like a quote in an email from Dick to Einat that Einat shared that I'm sharing here about self-led advocacy. And it's funny because in my earlier life, when I was working out in the desert, and when I was, in my 20s, I was more blended with my social justice paths and living from their values. And I really love that I had that in my life, and I also really love now that I'm in a position where I can do self-led advocacy via what I teach in the world. It's such a big, in all the work that I've done in my life with domestic and family violence victims, so orientated, and childhood sexual abuse survivors, so orientated to empowerment, you know, just facilitating a process that the client finds their own power and agency through. And so I feel pretty settled these days in what I'm doing in terms of that social justice piece. Although I will say here, I miss working for Aboriginal run organisations. And if I ever go missing, I'm in the desert doing that. If I drop out for some reason, just letting everybody know I've gone back. And I feel more comfortable sitting in the red dirt under a gum tree next to, not across from someone drawing in the sand, and just being there. Segue or sidetrack. My son is now a tour guide at Uluru and has returned to living in the desert, and works cross-culturally and with joint management. And there's something about having a child that, having my son there, that also my social justice parts feel really, proud of. That's still happening. There's still that connection to those spaces. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like this full circle.
Yeah.
That you see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Emma, what you just spoke about, really, it does highlight this, the value that we can, in IFS, we know intuitively that our part, like the social justice part, can really inform how we want to show up in the world, but informed and be supported by self. And because your part has the knowledge, has accumulated wisdom and knowledge through your experiences, and now it's informing you how in this way. It's such a good example of heart being in relationship with self.
It's like I guess my social justice part now is like a consultant.
Yeah.
A consultant that will bug me if I haven't acted on something.
Yeah.
With my often it is like not so much that it's just that the fullness of life. Like my managers that are like, yeah, I'll do that, but got to deal with this, right? These things that are right in front of me, and then that piece around reaching out to somebody or writing something or having an idea and putting energy towards that idea. And I just want to acknowledge that as I say that, I've got my social justice part sort of really wanting to organically and at the right pace create spaces where Indigenous practice and wisdoms and IFS can weave together. Because I think they're really, really resonant. And I have in my past been far more connected to working in Indigenous spaces, and I'm still really quite connected to that, but I have a vision or a pull to work more collaboratively and make that happen. But I also know that I don't want it to be white fella led. white fellas with good intentions led. So I just want to, like on so many ways, I've benefited from seeds planted and watered by others. And so I just want to provide a little water to that and see how it can grow. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So Emma, just talking about seeds and watering and plants, just shifting quite slightly in terms of being a trainer and being, and particularly when we meet people who are first time exposed to IFS and then they're on the IFS journey as a therapist, what would you say are the two most important things that you would like to plant for the new IFS therapist, and how would say the two most important thing for emerging IFS therapists to keep in mind?
The two things that stand out straight away is do your own therapy and practice self-leadership.
Love that.
Yeah, that's, it's I don't know how to do this otherwise. And even if in the beginning it's, I don't know, pseudo self or self-like-ish parts trying, it's still, you eventually get to see that. And then you go, oh, it's okay. It's like there's no right, there's no wrong. There's just a process of becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. And it isn't easy. It's not, it's like right brain, but we've been so indoctrinated into left brain type of like, yeah, it's follow a protocol. But our psyches aren't like that. They're non-linear, and they, and, and, and so I would say, I know it's hard to start. I remember starting, it's not, but keep at it. And your own therapy is, I really haven't found evidence otherwise that the depth and the breadth of your own work and your own system informs the depth and the breadth of the places you can go with another.
Yeah.
And I love that Joseph Campbell quote. It's, the cave that you are afraid to enter holds the treasure you seek. And it really does.
Yeah.
And I have to say, that's what I love about the level ones, is that in the experiential nature of it, it's it asks our participants to be in vulnerability into sharing their own systems, to being in the client chair and the scary therapist chair when you practice, and it's like walking your talk. Let's walk the talk. Let's get it in our bones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that really resonates with my experience, Emma. And yeah, it's one of the first things I did once I started my journey in IFS was to get my own IFS therapist. And I think what it gives you as a therapist is kind of like an experiential conviction. You know what it's like to go to an exile. You know what it's like to hold a terrified part of you. You know what it's like to be with the parts in you that have been terribly shamed as a child. So when you're then sitting with someone, you can hold such a different space for that. And especially if you've never done that for yourself, then when you're sitting with something and something like that comes up in a session, you're not able to hold space for it because all of a sudden your own shame is coming up or your own abandonment is coming up and you've never held that. And so, yeah, I really deeply resonate with that. I'm so glad I laughed when you said it because I believe that too, that to have your own therapist is absolutely, the most important thing for this model, especially. Yeah. Yeah, and I had a different question, but I think we've kind of already answered it earlier. So yeah, Loranie, I'm just going to kind of skip that one. And yeah, did you have something more you wanted to ask Emma?
Yeah, actually, Ollie, just what Emma said, and given that because level 1 training, it is very experiential. So Emma, given that there has been an explosion of interest in IFS, and particularly during COVID, where people were able to access, bits and pieces of the learning of the training through PESI, through Live Architect, through smaller workshops, and just, general reading and internet.
Yeah.
What impact have you seen, if any, on our level 1 trainings? And where people have coming in with so much knowledge of IFS already, and how has that kind of like impacted the way that the level ones are being offered?
Well, I really do notice that. I notice that most of the people coming in now have done 1 or 2 courses already, so have the theory of it and maybe have been practicing it. And that, but then there's participants that haven't still, and that's okay. It's like there's a broad range. You get a broad range, and there be many people up the end where they've got the general gist in terms of theory and reading and courses, and some that come in without it. So we've really got to kind of cater to this broader range. And what I notice is that people that so often participants that come into a level 1, we have a curriculum, and we start teaching that curriculum, and in the beginning it is what they've already heard. So it's kind of, it can bring up parts of like, I already know this, or like, let's get to the juice, or whatever parts come up at that beginning phase. But actually there's this purpose of teaching each step in depth. But the level 1s are really teach, show, practice, experience, and it's the practice and the experientials and the group field that elevates the what they already know. But when they come in with so much that they've already done, it can sort of mean that the field is very, very rich and alive already. I found that in our first level 1 in Australia, that one that we did that was so wonderful, is that we really did have such a rich field really quickly, and people that were just enthused and open. I think that's also, there's just a lot of enthusiasm and openness, and let's get at it. Interest as they walk in the room. So I think it's a great thing, all those pre-level 1 courses, and somewhere along the level 1, those participants that have done those kind of courses, somehow you get this comment of, oh, now I get why a level 1 is so important. Somewhere along the process, oh, now, I thought that maybe these other courses were enough. And of course they are enough, and they are fantastic. I just love the integrity of the level 1, which is get it in your bones, live it and breathe it.
Yeah. And that really speaks to what you said before about, with the level 1s, like we get from the head that intellectual parts to really get into the heart, and that journey of getting to the heart, being able to sit with all of our parts in a very different way from just thinking about the parts. Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah. And we role model it. We talk for our parts as trainers. We give personal and clinical examples in our teachings, and in our demos. They're watching it all and feeling it and sensing it all. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other very, very rich thing about the level 1s is that you have that whole training team. It's not just one person running a workshop. Like when I run my workshops in IFS, like an introductory, it's just me or it's one other person, but you have a whole team of people that have devoted their careers and committed to this IFS process, and they're supporting, is it 1 to 3? Like it's pretty...
1 to 3.
1 to 3. I don't know of any other trainings that are like that. It's pretty extraordinary, that part of it, having that whole community kind of, and then the trainers as well.
there's the benefit of seeing and sensing and feeling into how other trainers train, or how other the assistants, because you do swap in your practice groups. You've got a new assistant every, you get to be with 3 or 4 different people in their assisting roles. So you were exposed to, a range of how people do things, of the flavors that they bring. And I think it's also that sense of being held by a group, not just 1 or 2. There's we give this real big meta message in the level 1 of, we take supporting you and keeping this training is safe enough so that you can be brave and courageous in your work and in your practicing here. We take it very seriously. Yeah. And conscientiously. There's so many dedicated, awesome PAs.
It's a beautiful community. And
yeah.
And Emma, like, moving forward in the coming kind of year, what is happening for IFS in Australia? Yeah, what are some things you could share that are kind of coming up? Will there be more Australian-led level 1s? Will that be expanding, or will it stay kind of 1 or 2 a year? And also, like, what's the change now that's happening with the waiting list? I've heard that that's going to be different from now on, about the lottery. Yeah, just can you give us a general kind of picture of what's going to be happening?
Yeah, I look over this way because that's where my yearly planner is on the wall.
Yeah.
Well, we have Loranie coming in as a trainer. We have we've got 3. Kath Leas is on the LTP right now. We've got 2 others, Georgie Cook and Daria, who are in the assistant trainer program. So we have like a cohort of local trainers in training, and so yes, of course we can do more now, which is like, yay, we've liberated ourselves. And so I think we've got 4 level 1s this year. Oh, that's next year, 2025. And maybe more the next year. There will be more availability, which is such a relief, really. It's been such a kind of bottleneck of, demand and supply. So we've been working very hard to get us at a level where we can really deliver that and bring IFS to the places where it is called to be bought. And there's so much potential there. So yes, more level 1s. I'm not 100% clear on when I know the Institute has shifted, or is shifting from the lottery. Lottery is over, and the and there's more of a different application process, but I need to be really clear about that. So I'm not clear about it right now, Oliver. I really know that the focus is on our first focus, because there's so much potential, but it is bringing level 1s to those that are currently working in the mental health field in positions as social workers, psychologists, counsellor, family therapists. It's just the first port of call. And it's kind of mid-career, those that have done their training, that are ready to kind of get that in depth, those that have done their student training, degrees and masters, and then come to us after they've got some experience in their field in their mid-career to get that IFS training. So it's sort of, there's so many potentialities of how we could bring IFS to the world, and I'm really aware of that. I'm just going to guess, Loranie, you're really aware of that. All of them, you're really aware of that. It's what we're doing here, isn't it? Podcasts, and it's just being able to honor the integrity of the model and the living and the need for trainers to live and breathe that model, to really be able to teach it. So I don't want to say anything here that I'm not 100% clear on in terms of IFS Australia and New Zealand and the process of applying. Maybe you'll interview Simon at some stage and he will be really clear about that.
Yeah, great.
And I'm really also happy to get back to you on that because I think it's something important that I am clear on. But as I guess I've got trainer parts that are like, I know what my role is, which is to deliver the training, and have less to do, and probably will have more to do with the process of applying and what else we can do. There'll be more level 2s in 2026, which is pretty exciting. I'm looking to be able to deliver level 2s in that year. So I can hear my trainer parts going, great, more to learn.
Yeah. And will there be another level 3 in Australia? I know it was the first ever one this year, wasn't there? Is that right?
Oh yeah. Yes, there will be next year. Yes, there will be next year.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, we're ticking along. We're ticking along and we're expanding and growing, and there's a lot of potential. And so we're like, it's like that, like keeping it at a level of pace where we can maintain the integrity of the model and deliver it to where it's most sort of applicable in the here and now for those that are working with the most vulnerable people in our society.
One of the things that I most appreciate, apart from the level 1s that there's been that will be on offering next year, is also there's this widening and there's a bigger pool of certified IFS therapists and certified, approved IFS consultants here locally, which means that there's more kind of like more offerings for people who are interested in this model and to get support. So our well-trained therapists and clinicians here can offer workshop. And it's not just in Australia and New Zealand, but we're offering workshops overseas in Singapore, in Thailand, so across the Asian Pacific area. So that's very exciting. For those who are not able to go into level 1, but there's so many other offerings that we know that we can support and wider access.
Yeah, that is great.
So as we kind of come to a close in our interview, Emma, is there, this is a beautiful question. Was there one question you wish Ollie and I have asked and we didn't, and we didn't ask and you wish we did? If there is any.
The first thing that comes to mind, because there's probably a few, but I think it would be like, what does IFS mean to you? And I'd actually like to ask the two of you, what does IFS mean to you? So it's like a general question. When I hear that question, what does IFS mean to me? Like viscerally, I get this sense of like it's this precious treasure, and it's a key to unlock, and it's this pathway to inner adventure, and it's this endlessly wondrous process of discovery. And I don't think I've ever used this expression, but it gets my goat. Like, that's the wrong expression. Does that make you angry? No, it just excites me. Maybe my goat is excitable. It really, 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 I do believe that IFS is a pathway and a gift to everybody of discovering the preciousness of themselves and the gift, the unique frequencies and gifts that are in them. And that's like that kind of one of the goals of IFS is that what are we here to do other than bring our gifts to the world? You know, to release the constraints so that we can turn up in the uniqueness of our being. So, Ollie, what does IFS mean to you?
Well, thank you so much for asking me too. That was I resonated with so much of what you just said. It's become so much more than a personal therapy or something that I use with my clients. Yeah, it's become this embodied, deeply kind of somatic, emotional, heart-centered experience where regularly now I spend time inside connecting with, relating to, holding space for all the different aspects of who I am. And it is so relieving to feel my wholeness and to realize just how broad I am as a being. And then to be able to then honor that and allow others to start to see that in themselves, that there's so much more than, maybe the one thing that they bring to therapy of being anxious or angry or depressed or drinking or whatever it might be, that we're all these very complex systemic beings that have this plethora of, as you said, skills, attributes, qualities. So it's become spiritual. It's become much more than just, it's definitely not a model. It's definitely not just a model or something that we do with clients. Anyway, that's what came out.
I totally resonate with all what you just said. It's beautiful. Loranie, what does IFS mean to you?
Yes. Thank you, Emma, for asking that. And I've been sitting with this evolution of my understanding of IFS, and the best I can come up with at this stage is like, for me, it's this ancient wisdom that's coming through, this ancient knowing that comes through. And IFS for me is an invitation to connect to the ancient wisdom that's in all of us. And as I'm sitting with this, even, as a therapist, as a client, as a trainer, that is being an instrument for this ancient wisdom to come through. And the invitation is to receive the ancient wisdom. So I'm forever grateful to be reminded. IFS really reminded me of that deep knowing and deep appreciation.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so, Emma, just kind of our last question, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to have supervision with you, if they want to get to know you more, how would they do that?
Yeah. That's I often, even in the busyness of being a working mother, I've often had this part that goes, I wish there were two of me, maybe three or four, because my wall calendar is booked 2 years ahead, and I don't have a lot of capacity to take on much more. My part, my manage, like there's a part of me that's just good. You're learning to say it. So people can definitely get in touch with me via my email. My WhatsApp is just crazy, and I can't get on top of that. There's a lot of groups, and my phone, I just don't tend to pay as much attention to, but email is good. at this point in time, I'm not taking on any more clients or supervisees. I do run supervision groups. I do have a small cohort of clients that I'm still working with because I feel like it's necessary for me to keep in practice. And the supervision groups I just totally love. So that's what I'm open to. And I want to come with a warning as well, my parts. I am not, like, my admin parts are kind of slightly overwhelmed, and they've never been that much of a priority. So if you do email me and I don't get back to you within a week, I do apologize. But I do seem to be able to track my emails better than any other way of communication with me. So please email me. And also, I really, really do love I really do love meeting people. And I really do. I love our community calls. I like the last community call I didn't do anything on. I just got to see the community and I just loved that. I do wish we could like magically beam ourselves into an actual room together, because those kind of like the connections and the friendships and the conversations I want to have with people could happen more in the same space. I really, really have loved seeing you again, Oliver, today. That's been really nice. It's been so good. So yeah, email would be the way to get in touch with me. And particularly if anyone is interested in collaborating on interesting projects and bringing IFS to spaces where it's really needed. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Emma. And if people want to get, if people are interested in level 1, then they go through Mind Beyond, don't they? Through Simon.
Yes,
they don't come to you directly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So Emma, thank you so much for everything you've shared and for being with us today. This has been a really deep and touching experience of getting to know you more and hearing your journey, personally with IFS and as a trainer. It was really nice to hear kind of the different parts of you that have come up and how you've had to get the support and depth from your mentors and from your supervisors to get to this point. I think that's really nice for people to hear that trainers don't just appear, like they're on this big winding journey as you described to get there, and you have to do a lot of deep work to get to where you're at. So that's really nice to honor that. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Such a pleasure, Oliver. And thank you, Loranie.
It's definitely a beautiful way to end the year. This year will be our last, offering for the year, and so it's just really nice to have you, just to being able to hear your voice and hearing your journey, Emma. And thank you so much for all that you offer so far and continue to offer as we move forward.
Right.
And thank you.
And thank you, Loranie, for being here too and holding space and asking some beautiful questions of Emma.